So we're live. What's up, notJust developers? Welcome back to a new tutorial. Today is Friday and today we're gonna build a clone of Google Forms. Well, we all know that Google Forms has this reputation now of closing projects, with the latest one being Google Domains. And before they decide to close Google Forms, let's go ahead and learn how we can do a Google Forms mobile applications ourselves using React Native. At the core of this tutorial, we're gonna actually learn a much wider topic when it comes to managing complex multi-step forms in React Native. These kind of use cases are present in almost any applications that you're building, and without the right tools, it becomes really challenging to manage these multi-step forms. In this tutorial, however, I'm gonna show you a pretty fun way of managing these complex forms by using the right technologies. And then we're going to have our form management system is going to be very simple, and we're going to manage it with the next tools. For this project, we're going to use React Native Paper for the UI elements for the forms like text inputs, radio buttons, checkboxes, and so on. Then we're going to manage the logic and the validation of the form using React Hook Form. And powered by Zod, we're going to validate all the fields that we have in our form using this powerful TypeScript validator called Zod. We're going to do that just by defining the schema, basically how should our data look, and after that Zod will validate it, we'll send the errors to React Hook Form, and we're going to see them on display using React Native Paper. Everything is going to be done in the context of an Expo application. We're going to start from scratch, but I think that a lot of you will watch this tutorial in order to integrate this complex form management in your own project. So this is going to be compatible with both Expo application and React Native application. For this specific one, we're going to use the Expo router to manage the navigation between screens and also TypeScript. So in the end, what we're going to have is we're going to have a real example, checkout form where we have multiple steps. In the first one, we're going to collect like personal information, then maybe the delivery information, and lastly, the payment information. So let's put all of this together in an application that looks like Google Forms, but is much more useful for mobile applications for yourself. This tutorial is going to be useful not only for checkout forms. You can learn a lot from here and apply the same knowledge, the same system to other use cases where you have these multi-step forms like user registration, feedback, and surveys. A booking form, which you might book some accommodation or something else, a job application, or even onboarding. So that's the plan for today. If you're ready, grab yourself a cup of coffee and let's jump into it. All right, so hello everyone who is watching this live. How are you doing, guys? Are you excited for today? And I think for everyone else, while you're saying hi and let me know where are you joining us from today, while you're doing that, I'm gonna get started because we have quite a bit of things to do today to create this application. So let's go ahead and start by initializing an empty project using React Hook Form, not React Hook Form, using Expo, and also React Expo router. So first of all, let me go to my project. And when you are in the folder where you keep your projects, let's go ahead and run npx create expo app. Let's make sure to put at latest in order to take the latest version of create expo application. Then let's provide the name of our application, Google Forms, and let's provide the template that is going to use to start, and we're going to use the with router. This will start from a template that already has router with router. Did I Oh, it's with dash router, like this. This template will come pre-installed with the router and set up in order for us to start clean and have this navigation system already in place. Hello, Daniel from Amsterdam. How are you doing? Amadeo, hi. Rogelio, hello. So, yeah, let's see our application installed. While we are waiting for npm to install our dependencies, this is a great moment to pause the video, minimize it, and hit the like button, and also make sure to subscribe to the channel, because from our statistics, let me bring that up. Not this one. Where is it? I always lose it. Oh, here it is. From our analytics, we see that only 1% of you who are watching this video are subscribed to the channel, which is kind of insane. So guys, please, if you don't mind, hit the subscribe button and let's move on with our tutorial. This is our elite group of the 1% club, people who are subscribed to the channel. Let's go. And as you can see, just doing that actually worked and our project is ready. Let's go ahead and open it in Visual Studio Code. Not like this, but code, and there we have Google Forms. Here we have it. I can close the terminal. And let's go ahead and zoom in a bit for everyone to see. Here we have it. Come on. Oh. There is a small problem. Open. Projects, YouTube. Google Forms and Google Forms. Let's open. Oh boy, I dragged and dropped the icon of the folders here, and now I don't know how to open it, but we're gonna get there. What we can do now is let's run our application. Oh, actually it's here, folders. So I'm just gonna drag it. Oh, right, everything is back to normal. So now here is our empty Expo project with Expo router. Let's go ahead and do npm start to start the development server and right away run it on an emulator. If you have emulators installed, go ahead and press I to run it on iOS or A to run it on Android. Or if you don't have them installed, that's not a problem. The easiest way to run this application is to download the Expo Go application from Apple Market or Play Store, and then simply scan this QR code and you're going to have application running on your physical device. So with that, you don't have to mess with Android Studio, Xcode, and so on. So let's wait for the application to load and render here. I need some air. Coffee time. Yes, let's go. All right, so now we see the application running, and what we see is a very the welcome screen that we get from Expo Router. In fact, we see this screen because we don't have any screens in our application yet. And by simply pressing on this button on our device, we will see that it automatically creates this app directory in our project. In Expo Router, this is where all our screens will be defined. And by simply creating files in this app directory, we're going to create separate screen in our application. So initially we have the app index.js, and this is the home screen. And a bit later, we're going to add more screens for our multi-step form. What I want to do is I want to actually work with TypeScript. And as I see, the file is the index.js. Let's go ahead and simply transform from JS to TSX. And if you stop the server and run it again, Expo will automatically see that we want to use TypeScript in our application, and will ask if we want to install TypeScript and the dependencies. So let's press yes, and this will go ahead and install TypeScript in our package.json, and we're going to be able to use TypeScript in our application. Can I use Expo on my phone? Yes, you can run Expo applications that you're doing in development using Expo Go by downloading it from stores. It's available both for Android and iOS. So now we can press I to rerun it on the iOS device. Maybe R to reload. And here we see our application running with TypeScript. All right, perfect. So what's next? Let me go ahead and commit everything before we move to the next step. This is the first commit, the initialization. Okay, so moving forward, the way we're going to manage our multi-step form is we're going to create a separate stack navigator for it, a separate group of screens that are going to be managed as one single group. For that, let's go ahead and create a new folder inside our application called checkout. In the checkout, what we have to do here is, first of all, provide the home screen of our checkout, basically the first route of the checkout. That first route is going to be called index.tsx. And here, let's simply export default. The first route of our multi-step, if we look at our forms here, the first route is going to be the one responsible for profile, for the personal details like name, email, and so on. So let's call this function, this component, personal details. It's going to be a function that simply returns, at this moment, let's simply return maybe a view and a text saying personal details. We need to make sure to import view and text from React Native, and text as well from here. And how can we see this page? Well, in a moment, we're going to look how we can navigate from one page to another using links. But the way Expo Router is working is it's working based on URLs, very similar to how we navigate on the web. So it's going to be easier to showcase this navigation system on a web browser. And let's go ahead in our development tools and press W to open it on web. So if I'm going to open it on web, it actually opened it here. And now basically the way we navigate here, to which page we navigate here is going to be mapped to the screen that we defined in our application. So because we don't have anything, that basically means this is the home screen, the root screen. And this screen is our index.js with hello world. But if I'm going to do /checkout, we're going to see that here we see personal details, which means that if it automatically created this route that whenever we go to the /checkout, which comes from our name of a folder, it will render the home screen of a checkout with personal details. Let's, in the same way, maybe I can do a style font size 30 so we can see it better. Yes. Maybe I can do it like this for a moment. Now, let's go ahead and define the screens for the other steps that we're going to have. The second step is going to be delivery information. So let's copy paste this index from the checkout folder, and instead of index copy, let's call it delivery. Delivery. And this delivery, let's call the component delivery details, and here delivery. Let's do the same once again by copying the delivery and renaming it to, the last step is payment information, payment. So the component is going to be payment details, and here as well payment. Now, by going to the checkout, we see the personal details because that's our index.tsx. If we go to checkout, then slash the name of our file, for example, delivery, /delivery, then we're going to see the screen with delivery details. And if we go to the payment, we're going to see payment details. So now with this set of files, all the steps in our form, they will be handled as a separate screen, and it was really easy to set it up just by simply creating files in our checkout folder. The next step, maybe, the next step, let's go ahead and add the navigation between every screen. So starting from the home screen in the Hello World, we will most probably have a link here that will say, hey, navigate to the checkout. To navigate in Expo Router, we are using the link component, link from Expo Router. And I'm going to add them. Let me actually reuse this text field because it has some styles. I'm going to say change the text to checkout. And instead of a text, let's turn it into a link. The link expects an href with the location of the page that we want to redirect to. So for the checkout, we want to go to the /checkout. And now if I'm going to press on this checkout, I'm going to be redirected to the personal details page. We cannot see anything because it's at the top there, but in a moment we're going to fix it. So now we can navigate from the home screen to the checkout. And if I refresh, I can go back here and go to the checkout. Okay. Yeah, now as we can see, the text personal details is under the notch, and here we have a couple of options. Either to use a safe area context here to render the text below the notch in order not to render it under the notch, or we're actually gonna skip this step and go to the next step right away because it will automatically fix it for us. The next step is going to be to specify what kind of navigation container is this checkout. Because at the moment, basically these payments and delivery, they are still part of our root navigator. To define the checkout as a separate navigation, and in this case, to define it as a stack navigator, where we will be able to move back and forth between screens, what we can do is we can create the underscore layout file, layout.tsx. The name of the file is important. It should be underscore layout, because this layout file is going to determine, is going to wrap all our screens inside this directory. In this case, delivery, index, and payment. So here, let's export default function, and let's say this is going to be checkout stack. The checkout stack, and let's return what? We can return the stack component that is imported from export router, and simply returning this stack here. Come on. Now if I'm gonna go to the checkout, I see the header with the title index. And if I'm gonna navigate to the next page, for example, in this delivery, if I'm gonna have a link here, next with href, is what's the URL of the next page? It's /checkout/ this is actually in delivery. So after delivery, we have payment. Let's make sure to import here the link. And inside index, we want to navigate as next to checkout/delivery, because this is the second screen. So now if I go to the checkout and if I press next here, I go to the delivery and automatically can go back through the navigation there. Here I can go next to the payments and back, and we are on the first screen of our checkout form. Now you might think, how can we adjust the titles of these pages? Because right now they are not capitalized. The first one says index here. To do that, instead of letting export router manage all the screens, we can hook into them by basically specifying stack.screen. And if we give a name, the same name as our file, for example, index from here, then we are targeting that screen and we can provide options for the screen. And the options can be title, personal information. Now we should close it. And as you can see, the title of the first screen is already personal information. If we do the same for the delivery, let's say delivery information, and if we do the same for payment, now if I go to checkout, I see personal information, next is delivery information, next it's payment information. Maybe info, I don't know. It depends on you. All right. How can we make the checkout the initial page of application? Okay, this is a bit off topic, but if you want to make checkout the initial page of your application, inside index.ts, instead of exporting a separate file, what we can comment out everything here, and we can simply say export. Basically, let's first import checkout from .checkout, and let's do export default checkout. Hope it should work. Yes, we see the checkout here, but it's not including the layout. If I go next, Yeah. In this way, this personal details is the first one, the second one, and so on. I'm gonna leave it how it was, but that's one way to do it. Another way is to redirect. So basically, whenever you get here, just return redirect. And that's another option. Let me actually show you. For example, here, instead of returning, you can define the home screen, and instead of returning JSX, you can return basically redirect from export router, and we're gonna redirect to /checkout. And in this situation, if you navigate to home screen, you're actually gonna be redirected to the checkout. And I think this is better. I think I'm gonna leave it like this in order to have the checkout always as the home screen. Another question is this export router stable? Yes, it is stable. You can use it in production. Does it cover I want a drawer inside the bottom navigation? By default, it exports only a couple of navigators. In the layout, we see the stack. It also has the tabs, but you can actually integrate it with any kind of navigators from React navigation, basically. So you can wrap a drawer, and we actually covered that in a tutorial. I cannot remember exactly which tutorial was that, but we have it somewhere on YouTube with drawer and so on. Okay, we went a bit off topic. Let's come back to our Google Pages application. While we are still here at this stack, as you can see, this stack and options, it looks very similar to React navigation. If you have experience with React navigation, basically you do, because I hope you do, because React navigation has been the default navigation library for React Native applications. And in fact, export router is using React navigation behind the scenes, and that's why we can adjust all the configuration of our screens using options and other parameters from React navigation. For example, we can use screen options here to apply some options to all of the screens in this stack. And what we can do here is, for example, we can add content style that will be applied to all the pages inside this one. So for example, if I'm gonna add padding 15 on this level, you see we get the padding here, but not only on this page, on all the pages from this stack. The same we can provide background color with, I actually stole the color from Google Forms. No, that's another one. That's another one. It's this one. Yes, and also a flex one in order to make sure that the page takes the whole screen. And now, yeah, it looks better. Also with these screen options, what you can do is you can also adjust the header style. And this is the style of our header bar, and we can provide a background color of that purple. And it will look much closer to how Google Forms works. But in this case, we have to make the title white. So let's do header title style. Color, let's do maybe the color of the background. Yes, and if I press next, it works, but now the back arrows, they have the blue color, and it doesn't look really well. The color that is used here for the back icon and the back text is actually the header tint color. And we can specify this one. So if I go next, yes, now it's personal info. Maybe for the title, we can do it full white to be a bit more distinguished. Yeah, let's do it like this. Hey, Priyank, thank you very much for the donation. I appreciate it. Okay, so now our header looks really nice, but another thing that I see here, is the numbers from the status bar and the icons, like the activity bar here at the top, they remain black, and it doesn't look very well on a dark background like this purple. We can adjust them using the status bar from Expo status bar, and we have to put it side by side with our stack. For that reason, I'm gonna wrap everything in an empty fragment, and after the stack, or maybe even before, I will do status bar, and the style is going to be light. And now the color of the status bar became white, and it looks much better on the blue, on the purple background. Okay, so we have covered a lot. We basically implemented the pages that we're gonna need in the next step for this multi-step form. And yeah, let me check if we need anything else. Navigation between screens is implemented. What else? Yes, we are done here with the structure of our navigation. The next step is going to be to start working on our form designs. So before we do that, let's go ahead and do git add, git commit. Checkout form project structure. And yes, let's move on. Okay, so for the user interface of the forms, what we can do is we can basically implement them ourselves using text inputs from React Native. That's one option. Or another option that I thought would be really great for this tutorial is using a UI library that contains pre-made components like text inputs, radio buttons, and so on. The library that we're going to use is called React Native Paper. Let's open the documentation up, and let's go ahead to the docs. So from the docs, let's get started, and we're going to start by installing the library in our application. So let's open up the terminal, npm install React Native Paper. Let's check if we need anything else. We also need the safe area context, but our application already has it. If we look in the package, we will see safe area context. Yes, we have it. And we don't need to install pods because we are using Expo. Vector icons, we already have it. And yeah, that's it. In the usage, we see that we have to wrap our whole application in the paper provider. How do we do that? Well, in applications that before Expo Router, the place where we were setting these global providers was usually app.js. In this case, we do not have this app.js file that basically wraps all our screens inside. Our screens are all individual, but the thing is that we can use the root layout file that we have to create, layout.tsx. And because this root layout will encapsulate all our screens in our application, we can use it as a place where to set up our global providers. So let's do export default function root layout. For the layout, we either have to return some kind of navigator, like a stack navigator or a tabs navigator. But if we don't want to, if we want to simply keep what's already there, we can use the slot component from Expo router. And with this, we are back to normal. And if basically with this, we are back to normal. Now, if we encapsulate this slot with providers, that means that all the screens that will be rendered in our application will be wrapped by that provider. So let's import the React Native paper provider, or how is it called? Paper provider from React Native paper. And let's wrap our slot with our paper provider. Put the slot inside and close this provider. Now let's go on a page like checkout index and try to use a component from React Native paper to see if everything is working. So I'm gonna import a simple button from React Native paper. Make sure to import it from here, and let's do it after our next button. Let's create a button here that will say next as well, and this button has no corresponding Alright, so we already see the button here on the screen. It's a text button because that's the default mode. But if we change it to which mode? Let's see what modes the buttons have. Button. The mode can be contained. So if we select contained, that's a full width button that is displayed here. And with the paper provider, what's actually happening is the paper provider is supplying the theme variables for all our elements. So if we, let's see how we can adjust the theme there. For example, with customization, we have to import the MD3 light theme and use it like this. Let's import the default theme that's already there. Let's define our custom theme as everything. We're going to take all the properties from the light theme from React Native paper, and in a moment we're going to see how we can change some of them. But now we should make sure to provide this as a theme to our React Native paper provider. And with this, now you can change, for example, the roundness. Is it like this? Yes. If you change the roundness, you're going to see that all the buttons, all the inputs, and all other components that use round borders, it's going to decrease the roundness. So if you go to 0, that's going to basically be, everything is going to be square. For us, I think 1 is okay, just slightly, maybe 2, 1. Another thing that you can customize here are colors, for example, like primary and secondary, but I'm gonna leave them as they are because the default ones are purple, so it works for our application pretty well. Hey Amir, thank you very much for the donation. Thank you. John is asking if I'm gonna add authentication to this project. No, I don't think we're gonna add authentication to this project, but we have covered protected routes in our projects. Which one? In the latest one, in the Twitter, I think. check it out. So we have next here. And yeah, let's finish this next button with the actual logic of navigating to the next page. So we saw one way to navigate to another page is using this link component that we have here with the next. But if we want to programmatically navigate to another page when we press on some buttons, for example here, if I'm gonna do on press, let's do next page. Let's send to this on press next page. If I'm gonna press, I see the console warn that I have here. So if we want to programmatically navigate through the screens, what we can do is we can directly use the router from Expo router using this hook use router imported from Expo router. Now, inside the next page, we can do router.push, and here we can provide the URL of a new screen. For example, checkout/delivery. Now I can remove this link, we don't need it anymore, and if I press on the next button, I am redirected to the next page. We can copy paste the same button in the next page is our delivery, so let's replace this link with the next button. We're gonna have to import this next page function and use router in the delivery details page as well. Make sure to import Expo router and button. But button not from React Native, but React Native paper. React Native, come on, paper. So from personal details, we go here. From delivery info, we go next. And yeah, in the delivery details, when pressing next, we should go to the /payment. /payment. If I press next, we are on the payment details. So let's go in the payment details, and here we're also going to have a button, but this is our last screen. So this button probably is going to say submit. The function will do some kind of submit logic here. We're going to talk about that a bit later. And we need the router equal use router. And let's make sure to import router and also import the button from React Native paper. So when we press next page on the payment details, after submitting and validating and everything, probably we should go back to the home page. And in the home page, I'm gonna actually comment out the redirect because it's gonna loop around. So let's see the whole thing in action. Let's reload. From the home page, we can go to the checkout. From the checkout, if we press next, we go to the delivery details. Here, next, we go to the payment details. Here, submit, and we are back to personal. Yeah, not to the checkout, but where? Wait a second. In the payment, it should go to the home screen. The router, I think in that case, why is it going here? In the payment, let's try a link. With href, also home, And from payments, if I'm gonna go home, why it redirects here? What's happening on the web? Let's check. So if I go to home screen, I can go to checkout, next, next, and here if I'm gonna go submit, I'm back to personal info. That is very weird, but let's think about it a bit later. Let's add a to-do. Why it's not navigating home? But this is like home actually. This one will navigate back. So now you see from payments, if I press submit, I'm going back. All right, yeah, weird. But at least we have some basic navigation between the screens. And when we press submit, we are back to the first screen. All right, so I think we are ready to do git add. Maybe one dot is in this directory. So if you do one dot, it's gonna stay there basically. Or even go at the beginning. Yeah, like this, I might understand why, because we might get this stack, not the root stack. But this one, why doesn't it work? What if I use a stack here? Check out, next, next, submit. No. Yeah, weird. Let me add it in the notes for the end. Okay, so now let's go ahead and start working on actually the design of our form. And here, the first one is going to be our personal information. On the personal information page, we're going to have two inputs, one for the name and one for the email. And also we're going to have like these kind of cards that contain the information. I'm not going to keep very close to this design because I believe we can do better. For example, I don't see the reason why we have separate cards for separate inputs. And for that reason, I'm going to try to group them in the same card to use the space on the screen a bit more efficiently. So let's go ahead and open up our index.ts because this is where we will handle the personal details of the user. So this form, what we need is a text input. So let's go in the components. Maybe before we get into the to the text input, we're gonna look at the card. A card is a component that helps us render basically cards with maybe even background, title, and content. So let's go ahead and start using it. What we need is the card with maybe a card title and the card content. So from React Native paper, let's go ahead and import the card. And instead of these personal details, we're not gonna need it. It's gonna be the card title. Let's render the card. And the card requires, for example, give me style. So if I go to the card title, in the properties, title style can be, title variant, I meant. It can be title large, for example. So title variant is going to be heading large or medium. Let's go to checkout, personal information. Maybe not even headline, but title. Don't need it that big. Title large. Okay, that's better. So that's our card title. And if we're going to use the component card.content, we can provide the content details here. So here we can have a text saying hello. And we see the text as the content of this card. To add some spacing between the card itself and the button, I'm going to simply use the style gap on the parent component and provide a gap of 15 pixels. Now, all the components here will have a gap of 15 pixels between them. That's something new in React Native. What else? Yeah, I think let's go ahead in the card content, and here is where we will use text inputs. Let's go to React Native paper and look for a text input. Text input is here. Let's basically import the text input and use it there. First, text input from React Native paper. And inside our card content, let's render the text input with, for example, you can provide a placeholder name. You can also provide a label, for example, name. And this label, when you're going to start writing, it's going to be displayed at the top. I think this is very nice user interface where you still see the label after you write something. So yeah, that's the label. And we can add another one for the email. I think for the email, the placeholder can be something like an example. Nice. And let's also add the same gap for our content container. So here, if I add style and we do a gap of 10, it's going to add this space between them, the text inputs themselves. Yeah, I think that looks good. Another thing that we can do is we might want to adjust the background color of the text input. So by providing a style here, background color white, and here as well, it's gonna be white, but if instead of hard coding colors, if instead of this, we are gonna use them from the theme provider that we define here, paper provider with a theme. in that case, it's going to be very easy for us to make this application light and dark mode. So to do that, from React Native Paper, we can take the with theme hook, and we can get the theme using the with theme hook. Use theme. Now, instead of this white, we can use theme dot colors dot maybe background. I'm not sure what background is actually used by the card because I want to match the background of a card with the background of my text input. So maybe I'm gonna add a style with a background color to the card as well, and now they are actually matching. And let's do the same for the second input. Okay, now it looks something like this. Vadim, you changed my life with your coding. Now I have a coding YouTube channel. That's so cool. Go subscribe to the Develop with Mr. Shoya. What are you doing on the YouTube? So we have inputs. Do we need anything else? So we have a name, we have email, and yeah, I think we are good on this page, and we can press next to go to the delivery details. Let's go ahead and do the same kind of structure with a card with text inputs on our delivery page. So what we're gonna need from React Native Paper, let's try to do it again in order to make sure that we know how to use these React Native Paper components. So starting with a card, instead of delivery details, let's go ahead and render the card, where we will have a card.title, where the title will be delivery address, and the title variant, what did we have here? Title large. Then what we're gonna have a card.content with some text inputs imported from not React Native, but React Native Paper. So the label of the first one, what information we will need there for the delivery information. Maybe city. What else? Let's say postal code. Let's go with an address. And maybe some, yeah, in a moment. Let's go ahead, let's style them a bit in order to match our previous page. For example, the card content needs a style with a gap in order to add spacing between inputs, 10. The text input has this style with a background color, but for that we need the theme as well. So the text input has this style, all of them. And the theme we're gonna get using the use theme from React Native Paper. Just like that. So now if I go, this is the personal information, then we have this one, but we need to make sure to give the styles to our card as well, to have a background color a lighter background color. And the gap to the root container of 15. Yes, it's 15. All right, so from delivery address, we have city, postal code, address, and maybe we can do some kind of checkbox for the delivery, for the shipping information. Like, do you want a free, fast, or the same day delivery? The component that we're going to use for that is going to be a radio button. But more specifically, we're not going to use them separately, but we're going to use them as a radio button group. Having a radio button group, radio button dot group, let's import. Let's go to the delivery .tsx and import the radio button from React Native paper. Now, after the address, should we create a separate card for delivery? Yeah, I think in this situation it will make sense to have a separate card. I'm gonna copy this card once again. And instead of delivery address, we're gonna say delivery options or shipping options. Instead of these text inputs, I'm gonna delete all of them. I'm gonna only the card.content will remain. And here, let's render a radio button dot group and the radio button dot item inside it. The radio button dot item requires a parameter called value and label. So for label, let's start with a free value. What's going to be the value? Free. And let's do the same for the others as well. I know, fast. And say day delivery. Okay, now the radio button group component is missing the value and on value change. So for the value, you can do that using state variable for the shipping. Oh, come on. Shipping and set shipping. Use state from React. And let's use the value is going to be our shipping, and on value change, we're going to call set shipping. No? We'll have a value, and let's send it to that. Oh, because it's undefined. So let's pre-select the free shipping, and yeah, we already see it on the screen. So now if I'm going to change to fast, it's going to change there as well. Yeah, I think for this use case, it's really nice to have separate cards for our... Here is where we will type something, here is where we will select something. And then we have the next button. In cases where this is going to be a very long page, we have to make sure that, yeah, for example, if I'm gonna duplicate this a couple of more times, like this, we see that the button already is outside the screen. In this case, what we have to do is to make sure that our screen is scrollable. So from React Native, let's import scroll view and replace the top view with a scroll view. And now we can scroll between them. But the thing is that with a scroll view, now the style should be content container style. Yes. And in order to maybe hide the scroll indicator shows vertical scroll indicator false. Yes, perfect. Now, this way we're going to make sure that everything is going to be basically accessible. Let me go ahead and remove the last two cards that I added there, because it was only for the purpose to show long forms and how we manage them using scroll views. And yeah, I think it's safe to simply replace it in the other forms as well. For example, in index, the top view, replace it with a scroll view. Make sure where you close it, it's also a scroll view, and import it from React Native. Scroll view. And the same can be done for our payment screen. Instead of view, a scroll view, closing tag, and importing it from React Native. Check out next. From the delivery information, we can press next. And here on the payment information, let's go ahead and start defining the inputs for the data on this page as well. I'm going to remove what we don't need there. We're going to only have a submit button. And let's actually, from the delivery, let's take the code of the card with these text inputs. We're going to be a bit lazy and reuse some of these fields. Let's bring them to the payments.tsx, and above our button, let's drop the card. We're going to need to import card and text input from React Native Paper, and also the use theme, because we have to make sure to import the theme here as well. Use theme like this. And let's navigate to that page. Delivery, and we are on the payment information. Let's adjust the card because we will need other fields, and the title will be payment details. The first text input will be the card number. Maybe you can provide a placeholder as well, like, I don't know, 4242. For the postal code, no, we don't need the postal code here. We need something else. Let's do label. Label what? Expiration date. And something for the security code. Security code. The expiration date is actually not a text input. The expiration date is a date picker. So let's look what React Native Paper has for dates. So if we look at them, do you see anything with dates here? I remember that I saw date picker. Oh no, they actually don't. That's actually something extra. So let's do for the expiration date. Let's just provide a placeholder with why. And we're gonna initially handle it using some validation rules, and then maybe we can find and replace it with a more appropriate input type there. Should we put the expiration date and the security code on the same line? Well, we could by putting them inside the same view. That will have a style flex direction row. Let's import view from React Native. And if I go to the last page, yes, we see something. And maybe the childs need flex 1 and the same one for the second one, flex 1. Maybe some, for this view, let's add a gap 15. Yes. And here you can play actually, like you can make the expiration date input twice as large as the security code. Or we can do 3 and this one too. Yes, I think this is better. Awesome. And lastly, we can look at another component that can help us in on this form is switch. Let's use a switch to indicate if a user wants to save his payment details. So what does a switch need? Switch value well, basically the switch let's do it after this view as a, I think it should be in another view because we have a switch. And then we have a text. And the text will be let's import text from React Native paper. What will the text say? Save payment information. But actually I don't, let's first of all give it a style. No, actually I don't want this switch for this use case. This switch is actually turning something on and off. With saving user information, I think that's more of checkbox. So let's use a checkbox. It has also a checkbox item. And I think instead of a whole view, we can use a simple checkbox item, import it from React Native paper, navigate to the last screen. Save checkbox item, save payment information. Status checked or not is going to depend on whether later on we will implement that. Label variant. There is a position. Where do we want to display it? So position, if we do leading, it's going to be at the beginning. Yeah. So if it's unchecked, I don't really like because it's not very visible that it's a checkbox. But that's how it works on iOS, to be honest. So in that case, I'm not going to do position leading because it makes more sense to have this field here and checked here. All right, perfect. On Android and also on web, I think it should look different. So if I go to checkout, next, next, yes, here it's a proper checkbox. Yeah, I was looking, we can actually add a max width to our cards and make them on the web to look better. Maybe we have to do this max width to the whole content container here. And if we do align self center, but in this case it needs a width 100% to look on mobile devices and on the web as well. So now we can see that this is responsive, and if our screen goes smaller, it automatically adjusts. But if we have a larger screen, it's not going to display full width, it's only going to display 300 pixels. I mean 500. So you can do the same content container style for example, the payments of our scroll view and also delivery. And now all the screens are going to look well on web as well. Nice. All right, so we have good progress. We have added the inputs, most of the inputs that we need for our checkout form. Maybe by then we're gonna add, and we're gonna work with other input fields as well, other input types as well. But before we overcomplicate this tutorial, I want to cover the next part, which will include managing these forms using React hook form and also validating them using Zod schemas. And after that event, if we still have some time, we're gonna look into adding additional fields to the existing form, and then it's gonna make more sense because we will have everything already connected and we're gonna see how we can adjust it. So for that reason, let me go ahead and do a git add here, git commit -m forms UI, and we are ready to start with the next step by using React hook form to manage these forms. Give me just 1 second. I'm going to bring some water and we can continue. I am back. That's a good idea, but you still have to have this index. So what you can do is you can rename the index to personal, come on, personal. In layout, yes, you need to change from index to personal. And if we're gonna go to checkout, we land on the personal. But if on the web we're gonna navigate to checkout, it will automatically redirect us to the personal because that's the first screen and we don't have an index. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think that's very useful because all the screens now have personal, payment, and delivery. Okay, now we move into the interesting part of this tutorial. So far, we have implemented the user interface of our multi-step form. Now it's time to actually manage these forms. Whenever the user writes and fills the text inputs, we need to know the details about what he is writing. We also need to validate whenever he presses submit to make sure that the data is valid. And doing all of this without extra libraries can become really a complicated task in order to have all of this validation and all of these error states and so on. So for that reason, what we're going to do today is we're going to use React hook form to manage the form in combination with Zod to validate our fields based on a schema that we're going to define. So let's open the documentation of these two libraries. First of all, React hook form. This is the library that we're going to use for managing the forms. And in the get started, their documentation is targeted mostly at React application for web. They have a little bit of documentation here for React Native. We can start from here, but I'm gonna show you how we can do it a bit better by creating some custom components that will help us do it. Because on React Native, it's a little bit more verbose and it contains a little bit more boilerplate to manage the inputs than on the web. But that's not a problem because by doing a reusable component at the beginning, then it's going to be really easy for us to reuse it. So, React hook form. Okay, let's install the library. I'm going to do that using npm install React hook form. Let's do enter. That's the first library. Then I said that we're going to need Zod.Dev. Here is the documentation. Let's do dark mode. And with Zod, we can do this TypeScript validation and form validation based on the schema that we're going to define. So what I wanted to show here, I don't think, it's form integration. Yeah, we have a link here for form integration to showcase how we can integrate Zod with React hook form. To do that, we need an extra component called hook form resolvers that will allow us to make the connection between React hook form and Zod. So let's go ahead and copy the name of this package, hook form/resolvers, and install it as well together with Zod. So npm install hook form/resolvers and Zod as well. Okay, where do we start from? Managing the form or showing you the Zod? I think the best place to start right now is to first define our Zod schemas. So what are Zod schemas? These are a small schema that we define how should our data look. And using that schema, we can use it to validate inputs and automatically get error messages based on the things that didn't match in the schema. And also we can infer TypeScript types that we can use throughout our application to have type-safe validation and forms. So for that, let's go ahead and create a directory source in our application where we will keep all our source code, including our schemas. So in the source, I'm gonna create a new folder, schema. And in the schema, let's create a new file, checkout.schema.ts Should be X? No, it's TS. It doesn't have any GSX there. So let's have a look at one small example of Zod schema. Basic usage, we see what we have to do is import Z from Zod, and then using z.object we can start defining the shape of an object, for example the shape of a user that contains a username of type string. So let's start by importing Z from Zod. Let's define the we're gonna create separate schemas for every single step of our form. So the first schema is going to be our personal personal info is going to be z.object, and what fields will our personal information contain? One of them is the name, and the name is going to be z.string, and another one is going to be email, which can be defined as z.email. I think it's .string.email, like this. And now if I export this, no, do I need to export this one? Okay. Before we go next and use this Zod schema inside the hook form context, let's actually play a bit around with this schema and see what we can do with it. For example, if I'm going to have an object, let's say example 1 with a name Vadim and let's say an email fake, we can use this personal info dot parse method where we can provide an JavaScript object, and back what we're gonna receive we're gonna receive a typed object that has the name and has the email. So now what I can do is probably I can execute this file. Let me see if I will be able to do it using node source-schema -checkout schema. Cannot use import statement outside module. Do I have to do anything special to get the web version? No, if you're using Expo Router, you can simply run the application on web by pressing on W in your dev server, and it will run on the web. But what I was doing right now here is I executed this file that will try to parse personal information data with a fake email. And what we see here is actually we see a Zod error with validation code invalid string, and we see that the path is email. And if you provide a proper email, and if we're going to try to do npx test node again with schema, we see that the info has been parsed correctly and it doesn't have any errors. So with this approach, yeah, like what we do with Zod, we define the schemas and then we can parse data to make sure that it fulfills the requirements of the schema that we provided. And if not, it will throw an error and it will have a very descriptive error message, like in the case when the fake was not an email. So if we look at this, we see that the message is invalid email. You can also adjust these messages by providing here in the email property the message. Please provide a valid email. And if I'm going to run it again, we're going to see that the message is the please provide a valid email. So from this place, we can adjust like what error messages we're going to later display in our React hook form. But as you, and another thing is, of course, inferring the type of our objects that we are managing there. So, for example, if we want to type this info object with, let's say, the type of personal information, what we can do is we can define this type personal info equal z.infer, and here we can provide type of personal info. Let's call this personal info schema, and this type of personal info schema. Now this personal info, we can use it like this to define it here. Personal info schema like this. So now this personal info schema was a type automatically defined and created based on the object that we have here. And I think if we provide here minimum 1, in that case name should become not optional. I think it why it's not required. Is nullable, is optional? No. Let's do that. Here I'm gonna clean up the last rows that we were playing with, and I'm gonna export these two things from here. Export const schema and export type personal information. Let's go to the application, check out personal here, and let's start managing. The next step is to start managing the form that we have here with two inputs using use hook form. So for that, what we need is we need to import the use. Is it use form hook or use hook form? React hook form. And the hook is called use form. Let's go ahead and at the top of our screen, let's define this form. Use form. By using this hook, we define basically a place where we will manage our form. This hook will give us back a couple of things. For example, it will give us back a handle submit function that we should use to wrap our, basically when we press submit button, instead of directly calling the function of what happens when the form is successfully submitted, for example, going to the next page, we need to wrap this in the handle submit function. And what this will do, basically whenever we press on this button, first things first, it will validate that the form is is correct, and only after that it will go to the next page. So now in the next page, what we will also get is we will also get some data. This data is going to be all the fields, console, all the fields of our form data. Form fields, let's do it like this, data. At the moment it's not gonna work, and if we're gonna look here, I can press next and we're automatically redirected to the next screen. That's because we didn't provide a way for the form to validate the input fields. To do that, what we can do is we can provide here in the use form an object, and we're going to provide the resolver. And the resolver is how do we want to validate our fields. And using that custom resolver, let me actually check here in the documentation from React Hook form. We see Zod, and here they show, yes, we need to import this Zod resolver. And using Zod resolver imported from Hook form resolvers Zod, we need to provide here the schema, and the schema is the one that we define here, personal info schema. So let's import personal info schema, and also the type personal info, because we're gonna need this personal info as well. The schema is going to be the Zod resolver used for our application. And if you want, maybe a bit later, yeah. Now if we're gonna try to do next, nothing is going to happen. We look at the logs, actually nothing is happening. Why? No errors, nothing at all. Well, basically our handle submit function try to validate the data that we were trying to submit, and it saw that it does not pass the validation based on the personal information schema. And the form returns some errors. How we can get those errors? We can get them by destructuring the form state, and here we have the errors. So if you simply do console log errors, you're gonna see that by pressing next here, come on. By pressing next, we see that the errors is one error for the email, the message is required, another one is for the name, message also required. Okay, that means that we cannot go to the next step because our form still has errors. The problem is that at this moment, we haven't connected our text inputs with our form here, with our form from the use form. To connect it with our form, what we should do is a couple of steps. First one is we need to basically make these inputs, text inputs, we need to make them controlled by the use form. And to do that, we should destructure the control from the use form. We should import a component called controller from React Hook form. Here I'm going to show you step by step, and then we're going to extract it into a separate component because it's a bit of boilerplate at this moment. Now, having the controller component from React Hook form and this control here, what we can do is, let's go where we have our text input. Let's add some space before it. And let's start by rendering the controller component like this. The controller expects the actual control, which is the way we connect the text input with our form, because this control is coming from the use form. It also needs a name to know what is the name of the field that we are using here, and it should match one of the fields from your schema, for example, name. and then it has a render function. The render function is here to render the actual text input. So if I take this text input here, put it in the render, and control of null, what's happening? Check out. Yes. Let's try to write something. If I press next, if I look at the error messages, it's still email required and name also required. So that means that it's not yet finished. Like we haven't connected this controller with this text input. In order to connect it, this render function will give us access to the field properties. The field properties like what is the value of this field, the function that we need to call when we change the value, and the blur event. We take these three events and we send them to the text input like this. First of all, value is value. For the onChange, we're gonna hook it to the onChange text because that's the callback function from the text input that will be call the function with a text field, with a text string. And on blur, we're gonna simply say on blur. Now, if I'm gonna do 1, 2, 3 and do next, we see that the error is only for our email. The name has passed the validation. And we can test that if we make our email maybe optional or nullable, and if I do next, email required, nullable, optional. Yes, optional, and it works. But if I'm gonna have some value, I'm not gonna go to the next one. Why? Email is optional. Should it be before? No. Never mind. We actually need it required. I just wanted to show you that the name passed the validation. But in case it doesn't pass the validation, what we want to do is we want to visually show that somehow on the screen. One way to understand if the text input has an error or not is using the object that we see here that we get from the form state errors. But this one will contain errors of every field. Actually, the controller, besides the information about the field, will also give us information about the field state. And that information is, for example, the error. So now, using this simple error, we can provide some properties to the text input. For example, error. This one should be a Boolean, right? If I do it true, it's gonna render with red. Yes. So error dot message. No, there is another property besides error, like invalid. So for the error, which is a Boolean, we can send the invalid. And for the error message, what we can do is we can, if I remove, we see that it displays with red, but it doesn't show the actual error message. Let's use another component from React Native paper called helper text. And this helper text rendered usually is used together with a text input. And I'm gonna do that by wrapping them inside a view. And after the text input, let's put the helper text. So let's import view from React Native. Oh, it's here, view. And from React Native paper, we need helper text. Now in the helper text, the type is error. The visibility is going to depend on this invalid field. and the error message will be the dynamic error.message. Cannot read message of undefined. I think error question mark message, because error is not always check out. And now if I'm gonna do next, we see required. Perfect. Required. So with this, we have error messages as well to our controlled text input. I was thinking why. Yeah, for example, if we look at this value, we see that the type is any. The problem is that at this moment, our use form doesn't know what data it is working with. It knows how to validate it, but it cannot understand the type of that data. What we can do is we can provide the data type to the use form as personal information. And this is a type, and that means that now the value will be a string, because it knows that the value with a name is a string. And if we would use here a number, it will automatically understand that this value is a number. And it will automatically show us that, hey, maybe you're not using the text input right because the value is a number, and onChain should also receive a number. So that's very good. Like, that's very powerful, where simply the schema helps us validate our text inputs, let's say. I'm gonna go back to string here because the name is actually a string. And now what? Now I think we are ready to do the same thing for the next text input that will handle the email. But as I said in the beginning, using this React hook in React Native, React hook form in React Native, is a bit verbose with this controller, having to wrap all our inputs with a controller. So now what I would have to do is to copy paste it again for the next text input. But yeah, it's gonna get out of hand, out of control, because if I'm gonna change something here, I might forget to change it in another place. Instead, what I think would be a good idea is to extract this controlled text input in a separate component. And by sending just a couple of fields like what is the name, what is the control, and so on, we can have a much easier component to work with in our forms. So let's go ahead and in the source create a new folder for our reusable components. And here let's have controlled input.tsx. Let's export default function controlled input. And what should it return? Basically, from the previous page, let's copy everything here, including the controller. Let's bring them to our page here. We will need to import a controller from React hook form. We will need to import a view from React Native. And a text input and a helper text from React Native paper. Text input and helper text. The theme, we need to get it using the use theme hook at the top of our component. And yeah, and that's it. Now the tricky part. Let's see what properties this controlled input will get in order to make it actually reusable and easy to use. First, let's define the type of our controlled input. Props is going to be a basically an object where, first of all, we will need the control here. So control is of type control. Control that we can also import from here. Now we can take this control dynamically from the properties like this, controlled input props. Now we don't have the red warning here anymore. What's going to be the next part that will dynamically be sent? This name, like the name of the input that we want to render, that's also going to be a dynamic property, and it's going to be a string. Let's destructure this name from here and replace it with the dynamic name in our controller. The rest of the things like placeholder, label, style, value is coming from here, and on change text as well. And yeah, these three are coming from here, but the placeholder, label, and so on, these are also properties that will be, style, let's do it the same for all of them. But placeholder and label will also be properties that we will receive from the parent component, because all the text inputs will have a different placeholder or different label. But instead of manually adding all of the properties that we want to adjust from the text input here, what we can do is we can say that this controlled input extends the, how do we take the React dot component props, and here we need the component text type of text input, and this way our and now our controlled input props will contain the two custom fields, control and name, and also all the other properties from the text input. Now when we destructure it, we can destructure control name, and we can put the rest of the properties that will be sent here in the text input props. Now these text input props can be simply destructured here instead of placeholder and label. Text input props like this. The style, we're going to be the same for all of them. We want to change the background color. Value is coming from here. When change text as well. On blur, yes, I think everything else is coming from the controller. Now inside our personal TSX here, let's import our newly created controlled input from our components, and let's use it just below this controller by rendering controlled input. The control is going to be this control, the name is going to be name, and what else? We also need the placeholder and label, so let's put them here. So just like that, just with rendering this component with 4 properties, we basically replace everything that we had here in 25 lines. Because all of this logic is inside our custom component controlled input that simply wraps a text input inside a controller and properly sending the properties there. So now what we can do is we can safely remove our previous controller from personal.tsx, and instead of the next text input, let's transform it to a controlled input where we have a placeholder, we have a label, we have style, which we already don't need to specify the styles over and over because it's managed by the controlled input, and we also have to send here 2 extra fields, control and name of a field. What's the name of a field? It's email. Now, just like that, Let's refresh the page. Controlled input RR. No. Let's go to checkout. And now if I'm going to press next, we're going to see that we receive the error messages both on the name and email. If I'm going to say Vadim here and press next, if I'm going to say, I don't know, Vadim, next, please provide a valid email. And this error message is coming directly from our Zod schema. We can do it like this. We can. And if you're going to provide an actual valid email here, it's going to work and we can go to the next page. All right, so it was a lot, but in order to recap simply what we have done right now is we started by defining the schema of our data that the form will manage. In this case, this specific form will have a name and email. We define how this data should look, what validation should have, what data types, and what specific formats should it have. We also provided the custom validation error messages, and then we used this Zod schema inside our use form to use it as a validation method. Now with this use form, we made sure to wrap our inputs inside the controller from our form. And when we press on the button, we are calling the handle submit that we also get from the form. And this handle submit will use the Zod schema to validate all of the fields and call this function only if the fields are validated, or display the error messages on the screen if it's not validated, if there are some errors like this one. Perfect. So let's go ahead and commit everything, and we're gonna do the same for the next two forms, for the delivery and for the payment. I highly recommend you to pause the video and try to do it yourself for the next screens. All you have to do is create new schemas for those screens and start managing the form using use form hook on the personal and the payment screen. And meanwhile, I'm gonna do commit. Hi Ahmed, thank you very much. Could you make a journal taking application in React Native? That's a good idea. I think I will add it to my list of ideas. So let's continue and let's do the same form management, form validation for the next form for the delivery. For example, if we pass this one, in the delivery, we're gonna have city, postal address, and shipping options. All right, everything starts with defining the schema. So let's do here delivery form. First of all, let's export our Zod schema for delivery info schema that will be created using z.object because the information is an object. It starts. What will it have? First of all, city. It's going to be a z.string. We can also do a minimum length of 1. For the postal code, z dot, should it be string? I think it can be string. Let's start with basic validation and then we can come back and see how we can improve the validation by simply adding rules to this schema. So postal code is a string, address as well as string, and shipping shipping. Let's look at Zod for enums, maybe. Zod enums. Okay, so for the shipping, we can use z.enum, and here we can provide the possible values. For example, free, fast, or same underscore day. Okay, this is the basic schema for our delivery form. We also need to infer the type of one of these objects. So the type delivery info is going to be inferred from our schema. Just like that. Now let's go ahead in our delivery page. Here, what do we need? We need the use hook, use form from React. I always forget React hook form. We will need the resolver from add hook form resolvers /Zod resolver. Is it like this? Oh, Zod resolver. And we will also need the schema that we defined, the delivery info and the delivery info schema from our checkout schema. Okay, now let's define the form using the use form hook. Let's say that we want to the resolver, the validation, to happen using the Zod resolver delivery info schema. Let's say that this form is going to manage data about the delivery info, about this type, and we're going to get back the control. And what else do we need here? We don't need the errors because they are managed at the level of a field. I think only control. Yeah, maybe. Now, we're also going to need the custom component called controlled input. And instead of this text input, we're going to transform it to a controlled input, where we only need to send additional two fields, the control and the name of this field. The name of the field is going to be city. Then we have postal code. Let's make it a controlled input. Here we have controls. And for the name, we have what's the name in our schema? Postal code, like this. And lastly, this one is also controlled input for the address. Send the control there, and the name is going to be address. Now if I go to checkout, if I give some values here, next, and if I'm going to press next now, no. Yeah, that's what we also need, the handle submit. Handle submit. So in the button at the bottom of the screen, we go to the next page only after handling the submit. Only after validating that the form is valid. So now if I'm going to press next, we're going to see that the city is required, postal code is required, address is required, and so on. If I'm going to fill them in, I'm still not going to be able to go next because we still haven't validated the shipping options, field. Because this is already not a controlled input, this is a, let's say, a controlled radio button. Let's go ahead and remember what we did previous time. Previous time, to control an input, we imported the controller from React hook form, and we wrapped our component, in this case our radio button group, inside the controller. I mean, we didn't wrap it directly here, but we put it inside the render function. So in the render, we will render the radio button like this. The controller, of course, needs two extra properties, the control and the name. And name is, in the schema, we did it as shipping. Now the render will receive the field state, including the value, the on, come on, field state. Why TypeScript is not suggesting me? Value, oh, it's not field state, it's field value on change, and I don't think we need on blur here. The value, basically at this moment we should switch from using a local state variable. I'm even gonna remove it from here, the shipping and set shipping, which was a local state variable. Now it's not gonna be a state variable, it's gonna be managed by the form. So for the value of this radio button, we're gonna use the value of the field, and for updating it, we're gonna use on change. And the value here is a string, but it should be free, fast, or same day. Okay, let's do like this. We still are not showing the error message. So let's take the field state as well with the invalid and error. And we're gonna use them to probably, what are we gonna do with it? Should we display a helper text above the radio buttons? Helper text. Let's do the same as here, like helper text type error with the error message. And helper text should be imported from the React hook form. Can we somehow skip the personal information page? Because I always have to add it. To actually do that, what I can do is simply put our delivery as the first screen here. Checkout. Checkout. Oh, come on. Is it because of the delivery here? Helper text. Not from React hook form. I should import it from React Native paper. Checkout. And we are on the delivery form. If I press next, we see that the error appears here as well. And we actually need to select one of them. How would we add default fields? For example, I want the free to be auto-selected. I think to do that, we can adjust it in the use form hook. So inside the delivery file, use form hook, here might be something like default values. And for the shipping, let's say, oh, look, because we typed it with this TypeScript, it already knows what shipping can be there. So I do fast. If I refresh, if I go to checkout, it's auto-selected the first one. I think I wanted to do free. Checkout, and it's auto-selected with free. And if I press next, only now we can go to the payment information. So that's how we created these how we implemented the form management and also validation for the second part of our form for the delivery information. Okay. Now what you can do is you might want to extract this controller in a separate controller as we did with a controlled input. That will be controlled radio button. But I don't want to do it because I only have it here, so it's okay. The controlled input is used way more often, so it made sense to extract it into a separate component. You can do it as well. I'm not going to do it just because I want to save a little bit of time. So we are done with the basic validations on this page. Maybe we're going to return back to add some more custom validations when we finish with the next form. But for now, let me do git commit -m delivery info form management. Perfect. Last step is our payment information. So first in the layout, I'm going to put the payment information as the first screen in order to Now if I'm going to press checkout, I'm going to be redirected to the payment information because this is the first one here. So payment information. Let's open up the payment information page, and we will also need to open up the schema because we need to define a new schema for our payment form. Let's start as we did previously by defining the payment info schema using Zod. It's going to be an object, and what information will it have? It will have card number, z.string. It will have expiration date. I'm gonna do z.string for now, just to connect everything together. Security code z.string security code, and lastly we're gonna have save information as a z.boolean. Okay, so let's also make sure to export the type of payment info using z.infer type of delivery info. Perfect. Now let's open our payment.tsx component, and here let's start by importing everything that we need. We will need the use form from React Hook form. We're gonna need the Zod resolver hook form resolver /Zod, and we're gonna need the payment info and payment info schema from our checkout schema. Let's go ahead and define our form, const use form. Here we already know that we want to define the type of our data as a dynamic type var, and as a resolver, we're going to provide the Zod resolver using our schema. Okay, and we're going to get back here the control and the handle submit. For the handle submit, we already know what we have to do is we're going to wrap our function from the onPress event in the handle submit, and if I press right now, nothing happens because we get errors, and the control is going to be used for the text inputs because we're going to change from text input to controlled input, and we're going to provide here the control and the name. How's it? Number? Yes, it's number. Then for expiration date, it's also going to be controlled input. And for the name, it's going to be expiration date. We don't need additional styles. Actually, for this one, we need the flags. We'll see how it looks. So let's make the security code also controlled input. Yeah, let's see if from controlled input. Now it doesn't have a flex one and it doesn't look very well there. So if this view will have style flex one, yeah, I think it works. I hope it works it didn't broke in other places, but we're gonna see a bit later. For example, in the card number, it didn't break it, so I hope it's okay. And lastly, all our inputs became controlled, and this checkbox, we should also make it a control checkbox. We're gonna do that using the control component. Not like this, we need to first import it from React hook form controller, and we're gonna add it here by specifying the control, the name, which is save info. Is that how? Save info, yes. And the render is going to be this checkbox. What? Payment info. Oh, wait a second. I think I made a mistake here in the schema because I need to infer the type of payment information schema. Yeah. Now save info, yeah, works. And the status, if it's checked or not, is going to be determined by the form value. So form value is going to be I always forget. Is it field, not form? Field. So the value, now if we look, is a Boolean. So here for the status, we need to send checked or unchecked, and we're going to do that using if value is true, then it's checked. Otherwise, it's unchecked. Now it's unchecked. If I press, nothing happens because we should do on press. We're gonna call the on change and we're gonna revert the value. Yes, now it works. To save information or not. Now it works. Now it redirects to the home page. Really? If in layout, now we're gonna put payment as the last screen. And if we're gonna refresh the page and we're gonna go to checkout, we're gonna have validations for the first screen. We're gonna input it, name, email, next. For the delivery, we cannot go to the next one. We need to provide information about address, city, and so on. Next. And here we cannot go to the next screen. We need to do like this. And save payment info, submit, and we are on the checkout page. I don't know why right now it works, but good for us. So that was our basic validation for management for the last step in our multi-step form for the payment details. So let's go ahead and do git add git commit -m payment info form management. Okay. What we have right now is we have 3 independent forms that all manage information about what they need. For example, the first one manages information about personal information. Then we go to the next one. The other one is managing information about delivery, and the last one is about payment. The thing is that when we get to the last page and we press submit, in a lot of cases, at this moment when we submit things, we need all the information that we covered in the previous steps. The problem is that at this moment, in this payment screen, we only have information about the payment information. In a way, we lost information about the personal and delivery forms because they are different screens. So, in order to manage all of the separate independent forms as one complete flow, what we're going to do is we're going to use React context to manage this data at a higher level than the screen level. What we're going to do is we're going to define our React context that will contain all the data about personal information, delivery information, and payment information. It will wrap all our screens from our checkout page. It will not wrap the whole application because we only need these checkout screens to contain this information. And then on the last screen, when we press submit, at that moment, we're going to have all of the data collected in our React Native context. So for that, what we have to do is to create the context. Let's go ahead and in the source, create a new folder, contexts. And in the context, let's create checkout context.tsx. First things first, let's define the checkout context. Let's create it using create context that is imported from React. And we're going to initialize it with an empty object. To make it type safe, we're also going to do the checkout context type, which initially is going to be an empty object as well. But we will be able to specify the type of this context right away. So now this is a checkout context type. Okay, The checkout context right now contains two things, the provider and the consumer. So first of all, using the provider, I'm going to export default this function, which is going to use the checkout context provider. And checkout context.provider. It will send the value to this provider, which initially is going to be an empty object. And inside this provider, we're going to render all the children that the checkout context provider component will receive. So here, children. Okay. Let's do test and here ABC. Now I usually also like to export a custom hook that will give us that will consume this checkout context, and that hook is going to be called, let's also export const use checkout context. Is going to be a custom hook that will simply call the use context and will provide there the checkout context. And later, instead of importing two things, use context and checkout context, we're only going to import one thing, this use checkout context. Now with the boilerplate of our checkout context, we need to wrap our screens that depend on this checkout inside this function, inside the checkout context provider. The screens are, instead of wrapping our root layout the same way as we did with a paper provider to do the same with a checkout context provider, instead of doing that, basically I don't need information about the checkout form on every screen of my application. I only need it to the screens inside the checkout folder, the delivery, payment, and personal. So I would rather encapsulate the screens inside our underscore layout from the checkout page to only have these components that depend on the checkout context. So let's import checkout context provider from there and wrap our stack with it. Now, in order to understand if our screens like personal, delivery, and payment, if they have access to this context, we have here a value test. So let's go ahead in the personal. And at the top of our function, I'm going to remove the errors. Let's do const test from, not from, but equal use checkout context that was imported from here. Now, if I do console warn test, we should see the warning ABC here, which means that our screen has access to this value from the context provider. Okay, now what we can do is we can add state variables for our personal information, for our delivery information, and for our payment information. I'm thinking here whether these should be state variables whether we should manage the state variable of the already validated data, or if we should maybe move the whole use form to the context provider. I actually don't want to do that. I really want to leave the low level of form management to every individual screen. And in the context provider here, I don't want to think about forms. I want to think about data. So in this situation, I will have three state variables. One for the personal info. I will do personal just to keep it short, not to do personal info, set personal, info, set personal. This is going to be a use state, and the value is going to be null initially, but the type is going to be imported from the personal information from our Zod schema. So in the checkout context. The type is going to be personal info, imported from our schema. The same thing we're gonna have for delivery. Set delivery. This is going to be delivery information, initially null. And I think we also should say should do or null. And lastly, it's going to be our payment information. Set payment. Payment info. Payment info or null, and like that. Now our value is going to include all of this data, basically personal information, set personal information. I'm not sure if we need the values to expose the values. We can expose the setters because we will use them to save data in the global context, like this. It should be inside an object. Like this. And now our context type will include this set personal, which, if we look at the type of this set personal, is a React dispatch set action. And the type of this set action is going to be personal information. Then we're going to have set delivery, which is going to be a React dispatch set action, delivery information. And the same thing for the payment. Set payment. This one is payment info. Maybe also null as well, if we want to reset it, maybe. Yeah. Or no, let's not do like okay. Now the default create context here will say that, hey, we need to provide some default set payment and set personal and so on. So let's do a default one, which is going to be an empty function. I think set delivery as well. And lastly, set payment as well. And let's also expose a function called onSubmitAll that will be called in the last step, submitAll, submitting the multi-step form. And let's console log here personal. Let's console log here the delivery and the payment. And payment. So let's also export this onSubmit function, but we need to specify the type. So in the type, onSubmitAll is going to be a function that doesn't return anything, and the default value will be like this. You don't like it? Should be void. No. What? Oh, okay. Okay, so having exporting three setters to save a set personal, save a set delivery, save a set payment in our global context, and then a function on submit all that will display and basically will write into our console all these details. We can go ahead and connect this information to our actual forms. The first one is our personal, and here in the use checkout context, let's get the set personal, and this set personal, we're gonna use it with this data. The data next page function is called by the handle submit. This handle submit will send the data, and this data will basically be of type personal info. Now, because it's of type personal info, we can go ahead and set it in the global checkout context as data, set personal data. Now, the same thing should happen in the delivery. Here, we're gonna get them. Use checkout context, and we're gonna receive the set delivery. The next page will receive a data with delivery info, and we can use it to set delivery data. Now in the payment, here we're gonna receive data of type payment info. We need a const use checkout context, and use checkout context will receive a set payment and also the on submit all function. The first step is to set payment as data, and the second one is the on submit all, which in a real scenario will actually be an async function, because usually you have to wait to submit this data to a server, and that is an async function. So let's change this from normal function to async. No, the async should be a promise. Should we do promise dot boolean and return true if everything was okay, and return false if there was an error submitting it to the server? Maybe. So here, I don't know, promise dot resolve false, and on submit all will become async and will return true. Now in our last screen, in the payment screen, we're gonna do const success equal await on submit all, and here we can check if success is true, only then redirect to our page. Otherwise, let's do an, I don't know, alert failed to submit the form for some reason. And this failure is not necessarily related to the form validation, because at this point we know that the form validation passed. This is actually because of if there is some problems with pushing the data to the server. Maybe the user doesn't have internet connection. So on submit all, let's check it out. So name, Vadim, email. Next, we're gonna also keep an eye on the console, because at the end we should display this. So like this, I want free delivery, maybe fast delivery, next, and payment information let's do it like this, and expiration date like this, and security like this, and save, and let's do submit. Now we see submitting the multi-step form. We have an email, we have the address, but the payment information is null. You know why it is null? It is null because we are calling the setter, which is a state, and the submit all function, basically one after another. But we should remember, and actually I had a call with, a coaching call with one of the startups that I'm coaching, and that was the issue that I was explaining them to keep track of, because updating a state variable doesn't update the actual value right away. It will only update it during the next re-render. So basically in this case, we are scheduling the set payments to update, and on submit all, when we call it during the same time, like we do not have it yet. So maybe on submit all, maybe we can send this data to the on submit all, because this is the last step. Let's try that. But even then, like, I don't quite like it. That's a thing. That's a challenging one. How to do it properly? Like, one way would be to send this data to the on submit all, and then send the data here. And yeah, like in the checkout context, to receive it here as the payment information. But in that case, we're not going to have a state for the payment. And it's a bit weird that all the steps have a state variable and the last one doesn't have one. One submit all. I could do it with some kind of also some kind of states and use effects, but I don't see it as a very optimal solution. Any ideas, guys? Payment. I cannot here should submit. No, actually I'm gonna remove that payment state. Maybe I'm gonna leave a payment state, but I'm also gonna receive it here as payment info. So now now here I'm gonna do set payment info, and I'm not gonna depend on this payment in this method, but I'm gonna depend on this payment info variable, because the state might not be updated yet, but I'm pretty sure that what I receive as a parameter is going to be the latest information. Now in the payment here, I can leave a state payment, but it's optional here because all I have to do is send the data to the on submit all. And we'll on submit all. Here we'll receive payment info of type payment info. Let's check right now. If I do save now, we see submitting a multi-step form with this data: email and name, then address, city, postal code and shipping, expiration date, number, save information through, and security code. So now we see that when we press on submit in the last step, we actually have access to all the information that we gathered in every single step of the form up until the last part. So with that being said, I think we are done with the implementation of managing the multi-step form as a one, where we get data from every single step of that multi-step form. So let me do git add, git commit, okay, what else? What other things are you interested in? Should we improve a bit the form validation rules? Because at the moment, a lot of them are, if we look in the schema, in the checkout schema, a lot of them are simply strings. So let's have a look at the documentation from Zod for strings. And here are some of the specific validations. This minimum and maximum will specify there are external validators, contains, is after, and so on. So what do we want to do here? For example, regex is a cool one. What we see here is how we can provide the default error messages for the required property. So instead of saying required, you might want to adjust it to say, let's say in the name, when we say string, for the required error, we can say name is required. And now it's gonna actually say a more descriptive error message instead of a default one required. You can do that as well. What else can you do? Using the length, what we can do is on the last screen for the payment information, for security code, I think we can specify the length of 3, because all security codes should be 3 digits long. So if we provide here also the message, security code should be 3 digits. 3 digits long. What else can we see here? This is for dates, but we're not gonna directly parse dates. IP addresses. For numbers, you can specify greater than, lower than, if it's a positive, negative, if it's an integer. So it's very, very powerful. Like, oh, so optionals is the optional and then you put it inside the type. Or you can do dot optional. Look, with the merge, I think we can use the merge to merge all of the data at the end into one single object, right? So if we have one object, one base teacher merge, so for example, if we go into the schema and if we want to define a schema for our checkout info schema, that's going to be a personal information schema dot merge. We're going to merge with delivery information schema. And can we do a dot merge again? Yes, we can, using payment info schema. Okay. And yeah, we can export this one, but most probably we're only going to need the checkout data, maybe. Checkout data, which is a type. And this type is going to be equal z.infer type of checkout info schema. Now this checkout data can be in our context. For example, if we want to specify the data that we want to send to the server, checkout data, which is of type checkout data. And if I do it simply as an object, I don't think it should work. If I do ABCA, it says that ABC is not there. But if I do destructure where the personal data and also the delivery data and also the payment information, we can basically have all of them together as checkout data. Now if I'm gonna do fill in this form, security code should be 3 digits. 1, 2, 3. Submit. If I'm gonna look in the console log, we see that all of the information that we covered, like with address, with email, name, the security code, postal code, and so on, all of it was merged together into the same object, and it is properly type safe with all of the information that it has. And usually you would want to do that because when you send data to the server, yes, on the front end, on the user interface, you split it in multiple screens in order to make it much easier for the user to fill it in, but the server will still expect basically a bunch of data into the same object. So if that's the case, you can do that like this. And on the schema side, you are simply merging different schemas into one. Okay, what else can we learn from Zod? Partial, it's when you only take some properties from there. Arrays, you can manage arrays, unions. Promises, functions, like everything, all the data types can be managed with Zod. Let me show you how we can transform data types. For example, if I'm gonna look at the, you know what? I'm gonna work a lot with moving around the screen. So I think I'm gonna provide some default values. Let me go to the personal here, and for the use form, let's do default values for now as name, email, the same way with delivery. Let's go for the use form. Where is it? Use form. What do we have here? City. We have postal code 1, 2, 3. We have address, street, A. What else? What else? So from checkout, I can go next. Here, I can go next, and we are on the payment side. If we look at the schema, we see that the security code at the moment is a string. Should it be a string or should it be a number type? Because if it's a string, it can be AAA, but I think security codes can only be digits. So we could go ahead and change it from a string to a number. Let's add where it's not, the number doesn't have a length. The number can have minimum. Let's do minimum 100, or let's check for the numbers, greater, lower. Let's do greater or equal than 100, and then lower or equal than 999. To put it between these two, to have a 3-digit number. Now the thing is that the error is expected number received string. The problem is that at the end of the day, like, the text input is working with string. What we can do is, by providing to the security code here, let's do coercion. If I'm gonna do before the number, if I'm gonna do dot coerce number, in this case, what will happen is Zod will apply the number, where is it? The number constructor to transform the string from a string to a number. This works with strings, with numbers, with booleans, with begins, and with dates. So now we actually are writing numbers, and the security code is working as a number. If I do A, expected number, receive none. So in that case, it cannot parse from a string to a number. What else? For the expiration date, here I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna provide the regex for the expiration date. So let's use ChatGPT to get this regex. JavaScript regex for YYYY. Let's break it down. So the start of a string, the month part, it allows 2 digits from 01 to 09, or 10 and 12. Then 4 digits for the year. Okay, let's take this one. And in the schema where we have expiration date for the string, let's do .regex. And here provide this regex. And if I'm gonna do submit, it doesn't allow. If I'm gonna do 222, invalid. If I'm gonna provide 02, then 2022, it works. But should be greater than, it should be in future. Allow only dates in future. It's a bit more complicated, but not sure if it's the best idea to do the future, if it's a future date validation using regex. Maybe we can add something custom there. For example, regex. Parse data. Given any Zod schema, you can call it parse. No, parse async. No, save. No, save, refine. This one, we can do it with this. Zod lets you provide custom validation logic via refinements. For advanced features like creating multiple issues and customizing error codes using super refine. Oh, I don't need super refine. So what we can do is, yeah, like we can specify, oh, I can add it on the type itself. So look what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna refine this expiration date. It's a regex. That's gonna be the first rule, but I'm also going to add some custom logic here. So value, this is the value. ChatGPT, help me parse it to a date. GS parse a string with format y to date. It first splits and then it... Okay, let's do it like that. This refinement is going to be a function for me. The date string is going to be our value. We're going to split it by slash. And then the date is going to be parse year, parse month -1. And we're going to return date. Should it return true or false? I don't know. Let's check. If date is more than new date, which is today. And the second parameter of the refine is the message, where we can provide the other message. Card is expired. So now with this refinement, if I'm gonna submit now, it works. But if I'm gonna do 25, yeah, I think it should be the other way around. Like date, return true, basically return that there is no error if the date is in future. So now if I'm gonna do 25, it's okay. But if I'm gonna do 21, card is expired. 22, card is expired. 23 is expired. If I'm gonna change to 08, it's in future. Yes, so that's actually very powerful. So with a simple function, we added very custom validation logic to our field. And the cool thing about refinements is that they can also be asynchronous, meaning that you can call your server to validate a field. And where this might be helpful, it might be very helpful where you have something like a unique password validation. Your user will type a password. With a refinement, you're gonna query your server to see if the username is already taken. And if it is, you're gonna display an error message saying that, hey, this username is already taken. What else? With a card number. Let's do with a card number as well. How should we validate card numbers? Validate card numbers. I'm thinking, what's the best way? Should we have spaces between the digits or no? Hello. Regex for credit card number. Come on, ChatGPT. Okay, I think I like it. So let's take it. It will actually match Visa, Masterclass, American Express, Discover, and so on. So here let's do const card number regex equal to this one. What's the problem here? So this is a very long credit card number regex that we can use for the payment information number. It's a string, but it should match the regex of this. So if I'm gonna do 111 invalid, I'm gonna do 4242. It doesn't like the spaces, so can remove the spaces. It still doesn't like it. At least 12 digits. As I understand, it should start with 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay. Oh, okay. Yes. Yes, as you can see, it actually works. And now our payment information is properly handled using the number, the expiration date, security code, and whether to save information or not. Submit, and if we look, we see. You can do the same with a postal code, with an address. Maybe address you cannot do, but with postal code, I think there are regexes for that as well. With a city, maybe you can. I don't think you need to do anything with the city. Yeah, I think that's most of the thing that I wanted to show. Let's go ahead and git add git commit -m additional validation. And let me see what else should we do. let's say with these refinements that I showed you, you can also add additional validation that depend on different fields from your form. For example, if you want to provide a password and confirm password field, in that case, what you can do is, let's say you have, I will add it to the personal information schema. So we're going to have a password, which is a z.string, and a confirm password, which is also a z.string. Let's go ahead in our checkout personal information, and let's add two more controlled inputs for our password. We don't need a placeholder, we need a label password, and another one for confirm password. Confirm password. Password and confirm password. You can also add here a property secure text entry. Secure text entry. But for now, I'm gonna comment out secure text entry because I want to show you something. Come on. If I'm gonna press next, we see that the confirm password is actually required. If I come on, refresh. Checkout. If I go next, we see that the password and confirm password is required. But I can do 1, 2, 3, and here 4, 5, 6, and I can press next, and it goes to the next page. So at this moment, we are only validating that the password and confirm password are there, but we are in no way validating if they are actually matching. We saw how with refinement, we can provide custom validation, but how can we do based on two fields on the schema? Because we cannot do refine here, as the only data that we will receive is the password, and we cannot do it on the confirm because as well we need both of them. What we can do is we can add the refinement on the whole object of the personal information. So refine, here we're gonna receive data, and what we should return is, let's return, I don't even need the body, like if password, if data.password is different than data.confirm password, then that's going to be an error. And as the second parameter, I'm going to send the message, passwords don't match. So I think I should do if it's equal, not if it's different. And define is not a function. And personal information, and define is not a function because it has this refine. What's the problem there? z.object password and confirm refine. Yes, path of the error. Maybe we can specify where the error is added is to the confirm password. But still the merge function is broken right now. Maybe we can do the other way around. We're gonna merge the personal information inside that one. Yeah, weird. So now if I do next, we see that the password don't match, and I should do 1, 2, 3, and then the error disappears because our custom refinement that works with data password and compares it with a confirmed password is returning this message. And specifying the path, it will assign it to this custom password as an error. Not custom, but confirm. Okay, so that's something else. Git add, git commit -m, password validation. All right, guys, so I think I'm gonna stop here because we covered quite a lot of use cases with this form. What I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna go ahead and from the personal information, I'm gonna delete these default values for the name and email. From the payment, I'm gonna do, it doesn't have anything, delivery, I'm gonna leave only the shipping to free. And now I can do git add, git commit -m cleanup. I think we can do some extra cleanups, like in every file from our pages, like from delivery. We don't need a link here. We don't need the use state anymore. We don't need this text. We don't need this text input. And that's it. From the payment, we don't need the link, text input, switch text, and that's it. Now from personal as well, let's clean the unused imports. No, it doesn't like this way. And let's have a quick look at what we managed to build. Let me also open it on the web, you know. All right, guys. So in this tutorial, what we learned so far was to build a multi-step complex form in React Native that is going to be managed, and it's also going to be type safe using React Hook Form, Zod, Export Router for the navigation between screens, and other interesting tools, and that made this project really easy to implement. It was, yeah, like a bit complicated to set everything up, but in the end, now it's very easy to adjust things. It's very easy to add additional validation information or additional fields and so on. So what we can see is, initially, if we press next here, we see the validation errors. Let's go ahead and fill this one. For example, if I provided invalid name, it right away tells me. For the password, it will make sure to match the passwords, and I think I should hide them, but that's not the biggest problem. Now if they match, I can press next, and we go to the delivery information. After you fill in the delivery information with your details, you select the shipping option, you can press next to go to the last step with the payment information. Here, if you simply press next, you see that the card number is properly validated. The expiration date should be something in. It should be something in future. It will validate that as well, like 24. And for the security code as well, it should be a 3-digit. Fine on Android as well, and also on web. Here on the left, you see it on the web, and it will show the same error messages as we saw previously. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you did, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell not to miss our future videos, because we are going live every single Friday with new tutorials. I also want to tease something. So if you're watching this right now, keep an eye to our academy.notjust.dev, which is our premium course. Keep an eye on it during the next week, because we might or might not have something special for you. And if you watch the video till this moment, send me a message, let me know, because I might have something interesting for you. And if you are watching it here, that means that you are dedicated to learning full stack mobile development. All right, guys, have a nice weekend ahead, and I will see you next time with a new project. Bye-bye.